Folks, this is the True American Podcast. I have a returning guest, Martina. Sister Martina, as you know, she ran for office of mayor. And I thought she put on a pretty good campaign. I was really upset. If you guys look at my prior interviews, I was really upset by a couple of folks who did not give her a platform, and they should have given her a platform, period. And I'm not saying that because I was a supporter or a donor or anything like that. It just seemed it was an unprincipled thing to do. And I didn't see any justification whatsoever for her to be denied those platforms. And to me, it just, I don't want to, I'm not going to talk about conspiracies, but it just seemed like it was a deliberate decision. Hey, nah, we don't want folks to hear what she's got to say. I don't know why she wasn't talking about beating up my grandmother or nothing. So why can't we hear what she's got to say? I mean, and who are you to make that decision for me? Now, most of you know the results. Brother Daniel Greenberg won. I think he won over 50% of the vote. Deeriff obviously came in second with around 40-something% of the vote. And I think that the third place finisher was Sister Martina, just a little underneath 1%. And I was like, hey, given the fact that folks did not want us to know about her, she still came in third, and she didn't have a ton of money. She still came in third. And I was like, hey, in a real sense, I think she's the one who came out on top. You take all things into consideration, I think she's the one who came out on top. Now, sis, what are your thoughts? And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me and asking me that question. I felt fairly good about the campaign. When I entered the race, it was to make sure that certain issues got on the table, which I knew it would not with the two leading candidates. I knew there were certain things that were never going to get spoken of. So the 5 times that I was allowed to be in the same room with them, I do think that I was able to get those issues on the table. Mm-hmm. And some of our supporters believe that because of that, we began to hear something different from both candidates. In return, they suddenly started talking about neighborhood and inclusiveness, mm-hmm. which they had not been doing seriously before. Now, I should mention that they were big on inclusiveness, but they weren't big on making sure that I and my other independent cohorts were included in the public discourse. They also began speaking differently about the police chief. The first debate or forum where I appeared with them, when the issue of LMPD came up, I made it plain that the first thing I would do as mayor was to go to a new police chief. We need to get rid of that police chief. Wow. And so shortly after that, they began hemming and hawing. And then you may have seen in the last couple of weeks that Greenberg has announced that she will be going.
Right.
So all in all, that part was good. I learned so much in this campaign, so I can't feel badly about it because it helped me get some issues out there, but then also it informed what my next actions need to be. Mm-hmm. And what was really brought home to me, I knew it intellectually, but to experience it is another matter. What was really brought home to me was how corrupt our electoral systems are and how mainstream media enables that, how some of the major groups that stand for just processes and democracy and inclusion were the very ones that excluded me and the other independents in the race.
Yeah. In some of those groups, I mean, do you feel comfortable in naming one or two of those groups?
Well, absolutely. The Louisville Forum, which is on one end of the spectrum, is seen as a group that caters to the elite in the community. They meet once a month over a very expensive lunch and discuss public issues. And they parade as a nonpartisan group trying to inform the public. And yet when we contacted the Louisville Forum,
Uh-huh.
to find out why I was not included. We were just told, well, that's our policy. And that was it. No,
Whoa.
what is the policy? What kind of
Right.
policy is that where you're excluding most of the candidates, because it was not only me, but other independents, other candidates was running. So that's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, and this was most disappointing, although not surprising, we had groups like the Urban League, which if people don't know about the history of the Urban League, that's an organization that was founded by folks that wanted to empower, founded by African Americans who wanted to empower the Black community. And for the Urban League to sponsor a couple of political events, and not to mention the two African American candidates, me and Miss Licator, not to even mention us and not to include us, that is very telling. And so that's one thing going forward, that we've been saying it all along, but now we have concrete evidence that some of these gatekeeper organizations, such as the Urban League and others, who are held up as being leadership for the Black community by the establishment, that they're really serving the establishment and not the Black community. So, yeah, I received a lot of evidence for my dossier going forward.
Yeah. And the other thing that disturbed me, the Louisville Defender did a candidate profile. Everybody and their mother who was running was profiled. And I searched for you, not once, not twice, but several times, just to make sure before I went public, you weren't in there.
Yeah, that was disappointing as well. And some of my supporters reached out to the Defender and said, what's going on with this? And so they reached out unbeknownst to me. And so they came back and said, well, they said they reached out to you and you never did respond. So that's not true. They never reached out to me. I never received anything from them. And really, shouldn't you make a double effort anyway? But they didn't reach out to me, and I was easy to find. So once again, that's an organization that caters to the status quo, the elite.
Let me ask a few simple questions. I obviously heard a lot about the Democratic candidate, the Republican candidate. I did see some things about you here and there. Was money is money an issue in this mayor's race at all?
That's the other thing. I mean, I knew money was an issue, but again, I was getting into the race to raise issues and not to raise money. And but that really brought home the power of money in these elections. And so that's informed my view about the need, the urgency of not only campaign reform in general, but campaign finance reform specifically. When you had two candidates, I believe the last I looked, I think Greenberg had raised over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And then Durov had raised a little bit over $500,000. Wow. We had virtually almost no money in comparison. And for them to openly, especially Mr. Greenberg, to say at that $2,000 a plate dinner, oh, thank you so much for, your participation tonight, and with this additional monies, we're going to flood the airways with commercials. And so that brings two issues to my mind. First of all, that he admits openly that money is going to go for propaganda for the airwaves, and we'll be able to beat the opposition just by putting propaganda out there and hammering folks with a misrepresentation and just dramatics. Yeah. And the second thing, for him to parade as a change candidate, we're going to go in a different direction. in no way was his campaign in a different direction from previous campaigns. The same supporters, the Browns, the Binghams, the, muckety mucks of our community.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did a casual count of how much money came from the Brown family alone. And it was well over $10,000 just through that, and who knows how much they asked others to contribute, or so that tells you something.
Wow.
It's important. And Durham also had support from those corporate, the same corporate camps. And so going forward, I do want to urge the public to really, we all say that's wrong, but then we vote like sheep for the most part, or we give up, or we don't vote. I'm told this was the lowest turnout ever. Do you know?
No, I have interviewed a couple other guys, local guys who really do a lot of reading and research about local politics. They didn't mention that at all. But I think what others have said to me is that Corbin just seems like we just like sheep. We may say this and that, and there might be a black sheep here and there like you, but we just sort of like, let's go do what we usually do, even when they're not happy with the situation in the city. I mean, there's public safety. That was no one's happy with it. Well, no one I've encountered.
Yeah.
I'm not basing that on any type of scientific poll. No one's happy with that. No one's happy with, got infrastructure issues, issues with the West End. Hey, come on now, we got to turn the West End around. And yet still, voting wise, just did the same old thing.
Well, I think that's the reason behind the low voter turnout over and over again. For years, I've not condemned people for not voting, actually, because so many times there's no one to vote for, really. Mm-hmm. And so there's like this learned helplessness that has set in.
Right.
And I think that's unfortunate, because as a power base, there's nothing more powerful than the American people, than the citizenry. But you have to pay attention, and you have to get involved, and you also need to look at what's happening to your neighbor, be they next door or across town, because more than likely the same antics that are being used to repress your neighbor next door or across the town are being used against you. And so I still feel that there's great power in the community, and that's why I don't feel badly about the election, because as I said, I learned a lot, and it's informing how I move forward.
Well, like I said, earlier, I wasn't joking. I think that you really came out the winner. If people just sort of looked at the totality there, hey, coming in third in that situation, that's a heck of an accomplishment. Booker T. Washington, as you know, made a very famous statement that doesn't matter where you end up, it's where you started. So if you start at -5 and then you get the +5, but some other guy started at 0 and he got the +7, you're the winner, really, because all that you had to do to overcome to get where you're at.
I definitely feel so. We started late. We had little or no money. The press and the powers that be did everything they could to keep me off the podium. And this, what's also been very uplifting is that from day one after the election, the emails, the Facebook messages, the phone calls I got from people saying they had voted for me, and it was just so gratifying. And then with those phone calls, they had some suggestions or issues that they wanted to discuss. So this really puts me in a better position. I always felt better outside the city gate, behind, to bring some things to the attention of the public. And there were folks that supported me that I never thought would. And they're still engaged, and I'm still talking with them, listening to their concerns, and trying to figure out how to bring the issues before a larger public,
Yes.
how to energize that public to say, hey, Mayor Greenberg, you work for us. So right out of the gate, we're not going to have this. We're the villagers and we're just waiting for you to tell us
Right.
what you're going to allow us. Right out of the gate, as a community, we need to be saying, okay, you talked about transparency, accountability. We're going to start on day one
Wow.
by reminding you, you work for us and this is what we expect.
Look, we got to close soon, but there's two quick questions I want to put to you. What are some of your thoughts about, Brother David James had to step down from president of Metro Council? How do you feel about him, and how do you feel about him stepping down?
David James has been problematic on several issues.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I've been working with the community for nearly 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the community's vantage point, Mr. James has worked for his own self-elevation and worked for the status quo. And to give you an example, to the detriment of the West End and of the African American community, and to give you an example, his role in the West End TIF has been business as usual, I'm afraid. So he's really carried the ball on that. He's been the chair of the West End Opportunity Partnership Board, and some of the strong-handed ways in which he has treated public feedback regarding that has been draconian as far as I'm concerned. So, the West End TIP is represented as an opportunity for the West End, but yet who do we have controlling the dollars? It's the same old gatekeeper organizations that are, bellying up to the trough. The West End Opportunity Partnership has meetings where the public, I was told the other day they had an emergency meeting, and David James chairs that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That committee. I've witnessed an emergency meeting that they held several days ago, and there was a lady online who said, well, I have a question about what you all are doing. Mm-hmm. And she was told, you can make a statement, but you can't ask questions.
Whoa.
So this has been happening on David James's watch, and it's not unusual. I've worked a lot with the California Neighborhood Leadership Council and folks that are in his district and other neighborhoods. He's not seen as being a champion for the community, but someone that is advancing his own interest.
All right. Last question here. So what are some of your possible future plans?
Well, I've already been talking to some folks about running for political office. Not me, myself. I've had my fill of it. But I'm very interested in getting some of these young folks to run for office. As you may have heard, Pam Stevenson is running for Attorney General as opposed to keeping her seat in the state legislature. So we're looking at folks who we would like to run for that office. Through Louisvillians for Better Government, and I urge folks to check out that Facebook page, we're going to, in January, launch a campaign to better inform the public and to get the public to act as citizen journalists or citizen contributors to better inform the public about climate change issues, problems with TARC, JCPS, and try to get folks so involved. If that may be their little niche, but if they can be involved with a network where other folks with their little niches are sharing, just trying to elevate public awareness about these things and to energize folks, to remind these public officials, you work for us and we're not going to take it anymore. We're really going to lean on you and let you know what our expectations are.
Right. Sis, I really appreciate it. appreciate all the time you've spent with me. I think this is like our third interview. So I want to urge people to go to my website, booktalkwithcorbin.com, and see the other interviews. And is there a place now that, how can people reach you if they have something to ask or say or do?
They can reach me. My organization's Neighborhood Planning and Preservation. We have a Facebook page, NPP Kentuckiana. N is in Nancy, P is in Paul, P is in Paul, Kentuckiana on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. We also are on Instagram.
Okay.
And if you want to get on our email list, send your name, contact us at mppkentuckiana, all one word, at gmail.com. And, let us know what your concerns are. We had some folks reach out to us this week about the use of police in JCPS schools.
Yes.
And apparently they're utilizing some of those tactics that they were utilizing out in the public. So anything you're concerned about, land use issues, we have folks that are working against the West End TIF that have been reaching out to us, or, collegiate that wants to turn those apartments, which are affordable. They bought those apartments and now they want to turn that into a parking lot. So that's been a big buzz this week. As well.
Mercy, just take those people out and replace them with a parking lot.
With a parking lot. And Mr. Siebers, I'm told that the average rent there was $650 a month, which if you know anything about how the rents have been skyrocketing,
yes, I do.
These are within the affordable realm.
Right.
And so that has brought us into this discussion, which I tried to introduce during the campaign. What about these individuals who are paying their own rent, and 1 month their rent is, say, $550 a month, but then they're told, hey, guess what? In 2 months, your rent's going to be $1,200.
Yeah.
This is real, folks.
Yes.
And what are we going to do about that? So, reach out to us at mppkentuckiana at gmail.com, and then also check us out on Facebook at MPP Kentuckiana, and Louisvillians for Better Government on Facebook as well.
Okay, all these on Facebook, Gmail. We'll have this edited on the video once it gets out. Again, thanks a lot, sis. I gotta rush. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Anytime.
One of my pet things is all these abandoned pieces of property in West Louisville. That is insane.
We didn't talk about that, and then where they're going. And that's part of what's behind these rising rents. You probably heard about that Texas company that was allowed to buy so many properties in the West End. And they are in part responsible for suddenly this notice coming. Guess what? Your rent is going sky high and you're going to have to move. Or we had another incident that I was made aware of last week. Where a young woman, her rent was increasing from I think her rent was about $600 a month for a small house that was not well kept.
Right.
And she was told, okay, and after the first of the year, your rent's going to go up to $1,200, $1,300. And she said, well, no, I can't pay that. And they were encouraged. Now get this, knowing that she has 3 kids, she's a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
The response from the landlord was, why don't you go on Section 8? So that's a discussion I would love to have with you sometime, how Section 8 housing and upscale housing, that's what these landlords are going after now. They want high profit return on their investment. But both of those are essentially driving the prices for all of us up. And the fact that they would ask this young woman, she's not a rich woman, but she pays her own rent, her parents help her out, to say to her, why don't you just go on Section 8? And that's going to make us happy. That's a whole other discussion about Section 8 and how the taxpayer is footing the bill and losing on both ends.
Wow. Sis, as usual, you really get that brain. You really stimulate a brother's brain. I was thinking about going to Golden Corral and having a good time. Now I'm thinking I'm just going to go back to the apartment
Go to
and eat some beans. It's like, oh, man. But sis, I really appreciate you. And we're definitely going to do this again sometime.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Mr. Severs.
You
Much
bet.
appreciated.